Chet Coppock here. How you doing, everybody? Make it a point to watch. Hey, you make it a point. Set the watch. Set the alarm to watch Taped with my buddy, Rabbi Doug.
We're going to see Rabbi Doug. We're going to see Rabbi Doug. We're going to see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight. But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're going to watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're going to see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. Glad you could be with us today. I am very honored and privileged to have on the show today my good friend, sportscaster, author, and just a great guy, Chet Coppock.
Rabbi.
Chester, welcome to the show.
Anytime with you, it's a mitzvah. Now, I'm a Gentile, but I know exactly what a mitzvah is, and you are a mitzvah.
Well, I want to start out saying that we've known each other for a number of years. The first time I met Chet, and he was actually interviewed by me, was outside the funeral of the late, great Chicago Bears quarterback Sid Luckman, whose grandchildren I taught, so I knew the family very well. And outside there was, I got to interview Virginia Hallis McCaskey, and I got to have Irv Kupcinet and Essie Kupcinet on my show, and then there was Chet Coppock. And ever since then, we've run into each other 100 times. We've gone to concerts together before. We're both good friends with the band The Ides of March, and have been there before. And that was the last time actually we taped. You did a great promo for me. His daughter just got married. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very, very much.
It's very exciting.
I'll be paying bills until about 2023.
That's about how it works, you know. And I've got 4 daughters, so you don't have to tell me how that's going to turn out. But I'm thrilled to show our audience and talk a little bit about your new book, Your Dime, My Dance Floor, Chet Coppock in Pursuit of Chet Coppock by Chet Coppock. Now, Chester, I want to say, you wrote this book. It's your 6th book that you've written, and it looks like an autobiography, and it is an autobiography, but it's really an autobiography of your career and what you've experienced and who you've run into and met and gotten to know, and what you've really contributed to as well along the years. It's really amazing. Are books hard for you to write, or is it something that, you know, you're a great sportscaster, you're, you know, right, sharp on the air, but whether you're doing talk radio, sports radio, or whether you're on TV, on the news, you know, it comes to you naturally, but writing a book is different.
Would you mind giving my eulogy? I mean, or writing the foreword for my next book?
I'll be happy to.
Rabbi, I would bring this up. You know, we were talking about a mutual friend of ours, the late Sid Luckman, earlier. I had known Sid from the time I was about 5 or 6 years old. My father and Sid were both in the printing business, and they were very friendly competitors. But my dad had the account for Brock Candy, which was
the
worth
biggest
a
candy
great
company
deal,
in Chicago,
a great deal of money. And one year, Sid won the account over my dad, and my dad really never got over it. And you would think that that would leave me with a very bitter, very hardened feeling toward Sid. Well, the fact is, as time passed, Sid and I in the early 70s, when I became the public address announcer for the Bears, became very good friends. I used to provide him with season tickets. I helped him out a couple of times with the Super Bowl. And Sid would do some of the most wonderful things for me. Like, for example, you know, Rabbi, I recall when the Bears had their 75th anniversary, as we now look forward to the Bears celebrating their 100th year anniversary, Sid gave me the jersey the Bears gave him that night.
Wow.
But what I'll always remember about Sid is this. In the summer of 1983, the Papa Bear, George Hallis, was obviously in failing health. You know, the poor man was almost 88 years old, and you just had the feeling that time was running out. So I called up Sid and I said, Sid, I want to ask you for a favor. I know you're going to be with Coach when he dies. I'm sure you'll be with the family. When he dies, will you make it a point to please call me? Because I want to give George, Coach, Mr. Hallis, the eulogy I believe he deserves. Well, on a Monday night after the Bears had been beaten by the Lions and young head coach Mike Ditka, the day before, my young intern, I was at Channel 5 at the time, I was taping a radio spot back at WMAQ. My intern came running back and breathlessly told me, Sid Luckman's on the air. I think the old man died. So I went back and Sid said, he's gone. You're the first to know. And Sid came down and went on the air on Channel 5 with me that night. And it was at once for me very saddening, yet, being journalistically one who likes to break stories and
You broke
one
that
who,
story.
feels like you want to compete at the highest level. It was a great feeling of professional gratification combined with the fact that I really loved George Halas. I mean, the old man had his failings, had his frailties, but I knew he was, at heart, a truly wonderful man who did so many things the public was completely unaware of regarding helping retired ball players, charities, always without any public knowledge, no notoriety. If you did that, the old man would mark you off. But if you did it and allowed him to do it very quietly in his own way, he was probably as generous a man, as was Sid, as I've ever known.
Wow, what a great story. What a great experience. Just to not only to know both of them for so many years. I mean, you've known everyone in the business. You started out as a producer for radio for the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, are you originally Chicago? Where are you from originally?
Well, I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana.
In Louisiana.
But only
How'd you end
because
up
I
here?
was born premature. Then we come back to Chicago, and I'm raised in Northfield, the poor side of Winnetka, and went to New Trier, and I knew what I wanted to do from the time I was 7 years old. My dad wanted me to be a Heisman Trophy winner at Michigan or maybe Ohio State. I knew I was missing several ingredients, skill and running ability. So I set my sights from the time I was about 7 that I wanted to be either a sports writer. That was my initial goal, was I was going to be Dave Condon, or I was going to be Bill Gleason. I was impressed with both of them, how they could turn a phrase, how funny they were, how laconic they were. I was crazy about Royko. So when I took the job with the Milwaukee Bucks, I was only 22 years old. And Eddie Doucette, the voice of the Bucks, who I'd met the year before when he was doing a summer relief gig at WFLD, and I was his producer, he called me about 10 days before the exhibition season opened and said, listen, my producer is taken ill. If you want the producer's job, it's yours, but I've got to have an answer now.
Wow.
I said, Eddie, the next sound you hear is going to be my car screeching into your parking lot. So I took it to Rabbi and did 10 exhibition games, 82 regular season games, and 12 playoff games. And on April 30th, 1971, my 23rd birthday, the Bucks won their NBA title with a young Ferdinand Lewis Alcindor, a.k.a. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Oscar Robertson. And it was funny afterwards. I remember Wes Pavlon, our team owner, walked up to me and said, you aren't a player, so really, we're under no obligation to give you a ring. But if you want one, we'll give you one. Or you can have $2,000, or you can have this. He had this trip to Puerto Vallarta or Cancun or something like that. I wanted to buy a new car, so I took the money. And I have forever been regretful that I didn't take the championship ring.
Yeah.
Because, the ring would mean so much to me now. And the Bucks will celebrate their golden anniversary.
Sure, that ring was
2021.
everlasting. And
Exactly.
the
The
car
ring is
doesn't last
everlasting.
too long.
I don't even know what the hell the car was.
That is an amazing story. You went from there to being sports director in Indianapolis. And
Well, I had one intermediate stop.
oh, what was that?
Do you remember the roller derby?
Roller derby. That's a Chicago pastime institution.
Founded by a gentleman named Leo Seltzer here about 1937, 1938.
We talk about Sid Luckman, a Jewish football player. Now we talk about Leo Seltzer, a Jewish roller derby person.
Now I can talk about Mike Siegel, my attorney, Mike Weisberg, my accountant, and we can go on and on, Rabbi. But what was interesting was I'm at WFLD and now I'm a staff announcer. And, at that time, my voice is not what you'd call particularly strong or powerful. It's more like, available at Walgreens, Riberty, Walmart, and other fine stores. But they hired me as a staff announcer because Cliff Braun, the program director, kind of saw me, I think, as being like a son to him. Well, while I'm there, Jerry wanted to move his operations from San Francisco, the Bay Area Bombers, to Chicago. And we were going to broadcast out of the Hammond Center. He didn't have an announcer. Walt Harris, who was just a golden voice, mellifluous, didn't want to travel. So Jerry asked Dick, can you recommend somebody? He said, we got this young kid here, Coppock. He's kind of excitable. He sells pretty well. We think if you give him a chance, he'll be all right. Well, I did that for 2.5 years, and it was the nightly skate to nowhere. But Rabbi, I'll tell you, I wouldn't trade that time for anything. I worked Madison Square Garden. I worked the Philadelphia Spectrum. Did I don't know how many games in the old International Amphitheater.
I love that place.
I was young. I was single. I was keeping my bills in a sock, and I'm making at that time. Now, mind you, this is 1973. I was making $36,000 a year.
Oh my gosh!
Now that today,
that's more than anybody made.
I was ready to. I had a deluxe apartment at 6325 Sheridan, right at the curve by Loyola University, and I paid $315 a month, and I lived on the top floor.
Well, I think my father was a teacher at that time, making about $16,000 in Chicago public schools.
My gosh.
That's wow! You were doing very well.
Well, because he sold Joni Weston, the blonde Amazon.
Wow, that's another amazing story. You move on. So you go to Indianapolis. You're back in Chicago. You're doing NBC. You're doing radio. You're doing TV. You're doing sports radio for so many years. You're doing newspaper articles and writing. And you have your 6 books. And I want to talk about these books, just the titles of them. Fat Guys Shouldn't Be Dancing at Midnight. Chet Coppock, Laying It on the Line. Co-written by Buffon. Oh, yeah. Wow. Monster of the Midway. My 50 years with the Chicago Bears. And then If These Walls Could Talk, Chicago Bears Stories from the Chicago Bears Sideline, Locker Room, and Press Box with Otis Wilson. Just amazing things that you've experienced and shared. And all of these people so well over the years. If someone looks at this book, they'll see that a lot of these people are people you wrote about. So let me just take a few people that you talk about, because you talk about so many, and it's hard to really, we could spend probably about 3 hours if we went through everyone. We talked about Sid Luckman and Papa Bear, and tell me about Gale Sayers. Tell me about your relationship with Gale Sayers.
Well,
tell me about what to me, when I was growing up as a young boy, he was the greatest. When he was injured, to me, that was like sports falling out of the television because there was no one to watch anymore, because there was no more Gale Sayers on the Bears. Tell me about that.
Well, Rabbi, first of all, he only plays 68 games.
I know.
And he's the youngest player ever inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. I was in the ballpark December 12th of 65 when he scores 6 touchdowns in the rain on a very, very warm day at Wrigley Field when the Bears were still calling Cubs Park their home. I was there that day. And then 2 years later, when he got tackled on his inner knee by Kermit Alexander of the 49ers and went down with a significant knee injury. I just knew Gale in passing. If he saw me, he might wave, but around 1978, 79, after he'd been out of football and I get back to Chicago, we began to know each other, and I began to really recognize that, he wanted to be a pro football general manager in the worst way. He went to Kansas, and he worked in their athletic department. He worked at Southern Illinois, where I believe for a while he was athletic director. He never got the chance to be an AD, which really broke the Comet's heart. And sadly, I'm almost reluctant to talk about this, but I think I can do it. I hope people understand where I'm coming from, and I'm not trying to demean someone who is once a hero and who's a friend to me. But the last time I was really with Gale for any length of time, I was emceeing the National Sports Card and Collectors Show at the Stevens Center in Rosemont. And Gale was one of the premier attractions. And, wherever Gale goes, he is still a guy who stops traffic. Just absolutely stops traffic. Well, I remember the show promoter, Ray Schulte, walking up and saying, "We're having a tough time with Gale. He's just not connecting." And I went back, and, Gale knew me, and we hugged each other. I helped the comedy. He had to sign 400 items. It's not easy.
No, it's
not. I mean, you're sitting there and just writing, and writing, and then maybe having a sip of a pop, and then you're writing. And Gale might do 4 or 5, and then he'd go, "What am I doing this for?" So I recognized that he had CTE or he had dementia. the condition doesn't get any better. But this is a guy who came to Chicago who was as shy as the teeniest pussycat or the littlest mouse on the block, who became a man who I'm told is worth today around $50 million.
Sure.
He was beloved by George Halas. When George inducted Gale into the Hall of Fame, and I was at the induction ceremony, I remember the old man saying, "We will never see his like again." And the fact is, we haven't. You know, if you go back to 1965, Rabbi, the Bears have only had 4 premier running backs during that time. You've had Gale Sayers, obviously Walter Payton. Now, on my all-time list, I have Jim Brown, number 1, Gale, number 2, Barry Sanders, number 3, and Walter, number 4. Then Neil Anderson, who had to replace Walter Payton, which is a pretty tough act to follow.
Tough act to follow.
And then Matt Forte here in the 21st century. But, you know, being around the Bears all my life, I went to my first Bear game when I was barely 3 years old. This September on a Thursday when they open up with Green Bay for their centennial season, I'll be attending. Now, you won't believe this. You folks at home, you're not going to believe this. I will attend my 69th consecutive Chicago Bears home opener.
Wow.
69 in a row. Even George Halas, because he was in the Navy in World War II, never attended that many consecutive openers. The only person I'm guessing who might have attended that many consecutive openers would be Virginia, who I think the world of, who was the NFL's first lady.
Yeah.
And I find it almost, not tragic, but very sad that Virginia has never really opened herself up to a great extent with the public. She's a very private woman.
That's why I was so honored the day that she gave me that interview and
You
talked
were
about
very
Sid.
lucky.
I was,
Very
because I
lucky.
knew she did not talk media. And here I am, this young rabbi. We're talking about maybe it must be close to 20 years, 15, 20 years.
I think it was early 1999.
Yeah, and here I was, a young guy just doing TV for a few years, and I'm there with a camera standing outside, and Virginia agreed to talk to me. I was very honored.
Well, you know, as a matter of fact, I interviewed Virginia that day, and I remember, you know, she was very shy, she was very reticent, but you won't meet a finer lady.
So sweet.
And, you know, I'm more excited about the Bears this year. There was a time when I wouldn't dream of missing a Bears home game. I believe from 1958 through 1994, I missed one Bear home game.
Wow.
Because I had a fever of 103. If it had been 102, I would have gone.
No
I was
matter
their
what the
public address
temperature,
announcer.
you were there.
You know, I still hold the record, Doug. If you go back through all their public address announcers, and the guy they have currently, Jimmy Reband, who's been behind the mic for my gosh,
For a while.
almost 40 years, he was my understudy for 1 year. You know, he didn't learn at my knee because he was already ready. But I was the public address announcer for the Bears from 73 through 79. Now, at that time, I'm sportscasting in Indianapolis, where when I arrive, one of my anchor partners is a girl you might know, Jane Pauley. I remember the first night we were on the air. I went to our news director, Lee Giles, and I said, I don't know who that gorgeous blonde is in there I just worked with, but if she's here in 6 months, I'm going to be shocked. And he said to me, I'm going to be shocked if she's here in 6 weeks. NBC in Chicago already wants her. Now, what's interesting, it's a great story.
It's a great
This is
story.
the luck of the Bohemian. NBC in Chicago came down to scout me in 75. And I thought, wow, I'm going back to my hometown. And I'm only, at that time, 25 years old. Oh, this is terrific. This is fantastic. Well, Bill Slatter, who was the scout for NBC, came down, watched a couple of newscasts, saw me and saw Jane Pauley and said, why would I want that chubby guy with the long hair when I can have this gorgeous, eloquent blonde? So they were reluctant to take 2 people from one station, so they took Jane Pauley, but I wound up at Channel 5 about 4 years later.
Wow. Another great story. I'm telling you, we got to do about 4 more shows just to get through a little of this. We talked a little bit about Walter Payton. I want to skip to the coach, Mike Ditka. You talk about Mike Ditka. You had a relationship with Mike Ditka. He still today is, you know, outside of his health issues, which he has kind of overcome every single time, he's out there doing TV commercials, radio commercials. He's out there doing radio talk shows. He's out there, even with Mancow, he's on the radio all the time.
Yeah.
He's out there right in the public eye. He's making money. He's being the coach, and he's being very popular still.
Now I'll tell you a very funny
How did he
story.
stay so popular?
I'll tell you a very funny story.
Please.
I'm at WMAQ Radio in 1983 and at Channel 5, although I'm going to be fired shortly after this begins for reasons that were very political. But I was doing Mike's radio show with the late Mike Pyle. Now, Mike
I
Pyle
remember
and
Mike
Mike Ditka
Pyle.
were co-captains of the Bears' 1963 World Championship team. Mike was doing our show for $300 a week. $300 a week. He was probably the lowest paid coach doing a show in the entire NFL. I mean, today you can't get Mike Ditka to walk into a 7-Eleven for under $15,000.
I gotcha.
You know, Mike and I have had our ups and downs, and that's actually part of what I've enjoyed about the relationship. I remember in 1982 when McMahon was a young quarterback, he got injured during a ball game, and they took him to the sidelines, and they formed a huddle around him, and they clearly were shooting his hand so he could go back in. Well, the next night I'm with Mike Pyle, and we're at Malnati's restaurant doing the show with Ditka, and I said, Mike, why would you put Jim McMahon back in the ball game? He's your future. He's your quarterback. Clearly had a bad hand. You weren't going to win the ball game. And Ditka goes, well, what the hell would you have done? I said, I would have put Vince Evans in the ball game. He said, well, that shows what you know about football. Then after the show, we were laughing about it. We've had our ups and downs and moments where we've gone into free fall for each other. But let me tell you what kind of guy Mike Ditka really can be. In 1982, going into 83, and a horrible winter's day, I'm emceeing an event at the Conrad Hilton. Mike is the principal speaker. I called Mike the day before and said, Mike, would you mind coming over? I'm going to be starting Coppock on Sports on radio. Would you mind cutting a few promos? I'll write some stuff out. And he went, you know, he kind of growls like Mike does. And he said, sure, I'll do it. He came by. He wasn't wearing an overcoat. It was about 5 degrees outside. He's walking with a cane because his knee was being worked on significantly. He comes upstairs, says, what do you want? I said, I want 2 30-second promos, Coppock on Sports, 6 to 7 nightly on WMAQ. I give him some copy. He puts it down and goes, if you want to hear the best of yada, 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 and yada, yada, yada from the best sportscaster in Chicago, tune in nightly to Coppock on Sports from 6 to 7. Did them both. He did 2 spots in 2 takes.
Wow.
And, you know, I think he likes playing the gruff guy act. He's from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. His relationship with his father was at times very, very unsturdy. But beneath all the gruff, rough, tough monster of the Midway-ism that is Mike Ditka, this guy's got a big heart. He's a wonderful man.
Wow, wow, wow. I am so amazed on how you have insight on these people from knowing them, because when we look at them on the outside, we either see that tough exterior or we see that soft person, depending on the person, that shows themselves in public. And it's amazing that you know both sides of so many people.
Well, you know, Doug, I always felt like the job of being a sportscaster and being a reporter was not so much reporting the score of the ball game. Everybody knows that. And I mean, even back in the old days, you could flip on the radio and find out a score in 20 seconds, or if you were a gambler, you could call your bookie. But I always felt that the importance was finding out about nerve endings. How are people reacting emotionally? I would much rather cover, for example, a losing locker room than a winning locker room. In a winning locker room, it's, hey, we're all in this together. It's New Year's Eve in Times Square. We're partying on Bourbon Street. You go into a losing locker room and it's dread. But that's where guys are willing to almost unknowingly expose, what they really feel. So I've always said, like, for example, when I covered the first Super Bowl I covered for NBC in 1982, I was with Stu Nahan. Now, do you remember the Rocky films?
Sure.
Remember the silver-haired announcer who broadcast the fight with Rocky and Apollo Creed?
Sure.
That was Stu Nahan.
Oh, Stu.
Worked at KNBC in Los Angeles. He said, do you mind if I take the 49ers, because I'm from the West Coast, and you take the Bengals? I said, sure, and I'll tell you why. I think the Bengals are going to get beaten. I'd rather they had the losing locker room. He went terrific. So, Stu took the Niners, and I took the Bengals, and I got a very, very tearful Ross Browner to talk about the defeat, and, it was the end of mankind as far as he was concerned. So, you can find fun and you can find the unorthodox, not just in the arena of conventional sports or conventional wisdom. I loved ring announcing for the World Wrestling Federation. I mean, there is I've never had more fun in my life than standing in a ring in front of 19,000 people at the Allstate Arena and going, ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event. One fall, 60 minutes. for the World Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship, introducing the challenger from the Kingdom of Uganda. He is attended by his manager, the Wizard, and by his handler, Kin Shi. He is Kumala, the Ugandan headhunter, who, by the way, was from Yazoo, Mississippi.
That is so awesome. That is
But
so
I love
awesome.
doing that. In fact, I almost took a full-time job with Vince McMahon back in the 80s.
I got to tell you, we love your voice as an announcer, and I still use the promos you've done for me for my show from the past. Hopefully we'll do some
My
new
God,
ones.
those were made when Lincoln was in office.
So I want to go to another sport, of course, and let's talk about boxing. Joe Frazier, you write about Joe Frazier. Tell me about you and Joe Frazier.
I have a great deal of empathy for Joe. I always loved Joe, and I was in the Garden in February of 1970 with Brent Musburger, one of the really
Love Brent.
genuinely.
Love Brent.
Oh, I robbed shamelessly from Brent, from Jack Brickhouse, Howard Cosell. Having the opportunity to work 4 or 5 banquets with Howard Cosell, that's an irreplaceable thrill. I mean, Howard was just he was so good. He was so facile. His mind was so agile. He was so quick and so responsive. But here we are, we're in New York, and the night before the fight, Joe Frazier against Jimmy Ellis. I'm in Toots Shores, the legendary Toots Shores, with Howard Cosell, Dick Young, the entire New York media plethora of all these reporters I've heard about for years, and Brent and Dave Condon, Bill Gleason from Chicago. And then the next night, I saw Joe knock out Jimmy with a left hook that I thought left Jimmy's head on 7th Avenue. But years later, we're in the International Amphitheater, and Joe is clearly over the hill. And really, after his 3rd fight with Muhammad Ali in Manila, if you go back and you look at videotapes, the speech patterns of both those fighters were never the same. They were clearly they can say that Muhammad indeed passed away from Parkinson's, and I buy that to a degree. But he also had what we appropriately call pugilistic syndrome.
Absolutely.
He was terribly punchy.
Absolutely.
You can't absorb. Muhammad had a great chin. Nobody ever talks about that. When Frazier hit him with a left hook in their first fight in the 15th round in the Garden, nobody gets up from that punch, but Ali did. Joe fought a lifetime con named Jumbo Cummings, an absolute tomato can. And the idea was make Joe look good and then maybe maneuver him into a title fight. Well, he fought Cummings to a draw, and the crowd booed like crazy. I had given Cummings 7 of 10 rounds on my scorecard. And afterwards, Joe was mumbling about how he wanted a title fight. And I felt so sorry for him because he couldn't give up the dream.
You are just a
So
man
I feel
of
blessed.
a lot of golden
I've never worked a day in my life.
experiences. It's awesome. It's awesome. I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I want to tell you, I wanted to talk about Norm Van Leer. I wanted to talk about Jerry Krause and all these people.
Time out.
Yes.
This, for this poor little Catholic boy, is always a mitzvah. You are a great friend. You're a man who I worship for your ideals, your religious beliefs,
Thank you, sir.
your excellence as a talk show host.
Thanks.
Anytime you want me, I'm here, and we'll go to a kosher restaurant afterwards.
Sounds good.
And we'll eat till we drop.
We'll do this again. Chet
You're on,
Coppock
Rabbi.
here. I want to remind you his book, Your Dime, My Dance Floor. If you want more information about it, you can email us at info@tvrabbi.com. I will forward your questions to Chet, and I know he'll get back to you. If you want to check out our website, it's www.tvrabbi.com, where you can also see former shows on the web as well as this episode. I want to thank you again, Chet Coppock,
My
for being
pleasure.
on the show.
My
And I want to
pleasure.
thank all of you for being with us. Hope to see you next time right here on Tape with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.